Hello, I have with me today Kristi Payer. She is the curriculum director for Albertville City Schools, and she's here to help me and answer some questions.
Sure.
Thank you for being here.
No problem.
How do you maintain an integrated curriculum, both horizontally and vertically, that engages all students in rigorous activities?
Well, our first thing is to make sure that we have the correct materials and curriculum pacing guides horizontally. So we are looking at what is appropriate for that grade level based on our course of study, of course. So we make sure that our teachers are involved in those decisions at the grade level and at the school level. So for horizontal just curriculum decisions, again, we work with teams of teachers and administrators to make those decisions. As far as vertically, we are very fortunate in Albertville City Schools, as you know, to have system-wide instructional coaches in addition to our instructional coaches who are at the lower grades at the school level. So what we do there for our vertical alignment is we have vertical alignment meetings throughout the school year, particularly when we are making any changes in curriculum. Yes. We are careful to make sure that we, if a change is made at one grade level, that we look and make sure how that's affecting other grade levels. So that vertical alignment, I think, is a strong point now. It was probably a weaker point. I know that for one of our instructional coaches' background is math and science, and the other is history or social studies and English. So they divide those duties, and even though we're a big system, pretty big system with 5,600 students in our one feeder pattern, that's a lot of teachers that they work with, but we do have systems in place to make sure that we are aligned horizontally and vertically.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
How do you lead and motivate teachers to adhere to the prescribed state standards?
Well, I think it's important. Yeah, it's pretty challenging, but it's really important that we understand them first. And a lot of times when a change comes, like when the new science standards came into play, the biggest challenge probably in the beginning is just to make sure that everyone gets their hands on those in early enough before we're expecting them to implement those, and that we have processes in place to look at those standards and to compare it to what we've been doing, because I think a lot of times it's easier just to say, well, that's similar, or,
Right.
to assume that the teachers have looked at that. We can't assume, because as we know, teachers have so many things on their plate. It's very difficult to just get something new. So again, what we pretty much do is make sure that our courses of study are living documents, that's they're pacing. We actually use our pacing guide to make sure that the course of study is a living document. We take the course of study, and by grade level, as you know from doing the work, right, we make sure that the course of study is made into a pacing guide at the grade level, and that the teachers are doing that work by deciding where and how they'll pace that the different standards to make sure they're covered, and again, to make sure that they understand what that means, that standard. So unpacking those standards is really important.
Very important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. You're welcome.
How do you assess instructional programs, activities, and materials? What protocol?
Well, that's a biggie because I am in charge of textbooks. Of course, being part of the curriculum job is making sure that textbooks, but as we all know, textbooks are not what they were 15 years ago.
Right.
Now, so many things are digital. There's everything out there.
Right.
And it's really, you have to be careful to make sure things are vetted properly. Otherwise, I mean, again, we don't want to say to our teachers, you can't use other things. We have, of course, a core curriculum, but then we also have the ability to pull into other materials. But we do have processes in place, and that goes back again to our instructional coaches. The instructional coaches are part of our instructional department, and so they are kind of the arms and outreach with the schools to make sure that when we have materials being used in the classroom, for example, Rhonda Valentine, our math instructional coach, I use her expertise to make sure that the math materials and the science materials are appropriate for the grade level, that they are not that they're not just something that is a fun activity, but it doesn't really tie to a standard. We want fun and we want engaging, but we want it to be tied to a standard. Everything needs to be intentional. So we, again, you asked the process. Pretty much the process is that we vet things through our instructional coaches at the school level and at the system level. And of course, teachers, again, we're not saying that they can't pull in some activity, but we do ask them if they're going to buy any instructional resources, that we do vet those again through the proper, sources, the administrators, the instructional coaches. And then I have a process here for purchasing resources through our textbook money, where it has to come in, the request has to come in on a certain form, has to be signed off by someone at the school level who has been in either the textbook committee or in the group planning session for that. And then of course the principal signs off on that, and then I sign off on it on the money side to make sure that the money's coming from the proper sources. So I feel like we do a pretty good job of that. Again, it's harder now with so many